Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Mirror of Intimacy webinar. My name is Dr. Alex Katehakis, and today is Monday, April 1st. It's a beautiful day here in Los Angeles, a beautiful spring day, and a lovely way to think about regeneration, renewal, and how that is juxtaposed to our topic today of heartbreak. So before we get started, I just want to remind all of you that if you want to ask a question, to please type it into the Q&A box, and I'll answer your questions as we go along. And also to be sure to leave us your book reviews or comments on Mirror of Intimacy on the Amazon page. Let us know what you like about the book, how you use the book, how you love the book. A dear friend of mine and colleague, Dawn Cartwright, who some of you might know, sent me a picture of the book yesterday that she found at Bart's Books in Ojai, California. So that was a sweet surprise, and it's always nice to see where the book makes its rounds. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking the subscribe button below so that you never miss a post. And you can also keep up with what we're doing by following me on Instagram at Alex Katehakis or at Center for Healthy Sex. And I also want to let you know that the first installment of my new webinar series based on my new book, What Turns You On? A Guide to Living Your Best Sex Life, will be launching in June. This series will explore healthy sexuality and help you answer the question of what turns you on. So I'm excited to share this new series with you. So make sure you join our mailing list again by visiting centerforhealthysex.com and sign up under the Contact Us section to keep an eye out for the first episode of that, and so you don't miss registering. The quote for today, April 1st, is a final comfort that is small but not cold. The heart is the only broken instrument that works. And that is from T.E. Kalem. So a final comfort that is small. So think about that. A final comfort, the last comfort, a small comfort, but not cold. The heart is the only broken instrument that works. And when we think about heartbreak, and how much it informs us of what's going on in our lives, how painful heartbreak can be, it's important to recognize that this is a vitality state, that it's not a dead state, it's an alive state. And while it's not an alive state that brings us joy the way frolicking in the ocean on a hot summer's day does, it is still a vitality state and an alive state. It is broken, but it's working. And part of the reason it's working is because you feel the brokenness of it. You feel the pain of it. So keep that in mind, because so often we want heartbreak to go away. We want painful feelings to go away instead of letting ourselves put one foot in front of the other and walk the path of the heartbreak and the pain towards healing. And when we think of heartbreak, we can imagine overwhelming distress, and also a distress where we feel like there is no cure at all. And yet when you choose to live life fully, and I mean fully, to really dive deeply into and engage the painful state that we're in, the loneliness, the fear, the confusion, then we start to see each day as if it's our last day, because sometimes it feels like that, like I will never love again, or I will never be able to be in a relationship again. That is a full-bodied feeling state. And when we can open our heart in the midst of that, we are allowing ourselves to feel the depth of that pain. We can't escape the pain, and we don't escape the pain in the world. So sometimes our own pain is not just our own heartbreak, but the heartbreak of what's taking on all over the world right here and right now. Like, how many times a day is your heart broken when you look at the news? When you think about people suffering the world over, the people that are starving the world over. There's an enormous heartbreak to that and pain. And we can put our heads in the sand and act like it's not going on and go shopping, or we can take moments every day to feel that suffering, to feel the heartbreak for others, and to be in gratitude for the abundance that we have, and also send those people whatever you would send them, light, energy, prayer, whatever's true for you, but not to avoid it and just act like it's not going on. And that can happen in our own relationships too, whether it's with a child or an elder or a partner or an ex-partner, where we just want it to go away. We don't want to feel the excruciating pain of it, or sometimes just the average pain and the accompanying fear. Like if somebody that we love gets sick and we're worried about them, we can act like it's not that big of a deal, or we can let ourselves imagine what it would be like to not be without them. And that has us caring more deeply. So again, if you just look into the eyes of a homeless person on any given day, or visit your neighbor who's dying of cancer, perhaps, or turn on the news and hear the atrocities that are going on all over the world, then life will shatter your heart into a million different pieces. And that's the risk of living a life, of loving life and loving another person. And no one can protect us from that, nor should they. Because if we live in this veneer that everything's perfect, if we look at life through rose-colored glasses, if we don't ever want to look at anything that's painful or dark, we're really robbing ourselves of having a full expression. And we're also living in fantasy. That is just not the reality of life. We cannot know joy if we don't know pain. We can't really know love if we don't know loss. We can't know the experience of being deeply cared for if we don't dive deep into our abandonment, because we'll mistake somebody caring for us that doesn't really care for us because we haven't plumbed the depths of our abandonment. So what I'm saying, and what I hope you can hear, is that there's enormous amount of paradox in all of this, as there is in all of life, that one can't happen without the other. And we don't want to avoid the fire, avoid the heartbreak, avoid the pain, but the counterintuitive move is to dive deeply in it and see what's there. And when you dive in it, something releases and brings you to the other side, the other shore, if you will. So I want to remind you to type your questions into the Q&A box. And also, if you have questions about relationships, or you're struggling with a relationship, if you're struggling with sex or love addiction, that you can give us a call at 310-843-9902 and check out any number of our offerings, including a women's love addiction workshop we have coming up on Saturday, April 13th. And you can find more information about that on our website. So as you think about what I'm saying about the invitation to dive into your pain, to stop trying to avoid your pain, to really let yourself feel the depths of despair, loss, heartbreak, feeling betrayed or duped, all of it. I'm proposing that the diving into that is where your liberation is. So we have a question here. Is really affirmation that I'm properly processing the path of my circumstances. I'm a little over 3 years removed of discovering my wife's 3-year-long affair. I desperately wanted to hear, but my wife clearly indicated she's no longer desires to heal, to rebuild trust, or to restart professional therapy. This past February would have marked 30 years of dating and marriage. Wow, that's a long, long time. I fully accepted that I can't heal what I can't feel. That's a great statement. I cannot heal what I can't feel. And as such, when I sit in the hurt, cry, and meditate, I feel better. My therapist has helped me see that healing is when I no longer feel the extreme hurt when triggered. Well, that's a beautiful experience or statement about experience, strength, and hope, Andy. Thank you for sharing that with us. And it's so much better than anything I could say because this is your lived experience. Dismantling 30 years is a lifetime with somebody. And to be able to lick your own wounds and find peace and acceptance with the depth of those feelings and be able to recognize um, not what your part is in her cheating at all, but what your part was in getting you into a relationship that would have somebody doing that if there was a part. Um, and also what you put up with, what you stayed with, what you tolerated. And to start seeing that you deserve something more than that, that you're now better than that because you've gotten better. And when I say your part, I just mean our family of origins, indelible imprints on us that we are trained from early on, consciously and non-consciously, on what it means to be in relationship with other people. And we carry our greatest abuse and dysfunction forward into our love relationships. We can't really do it any other way. And so we have to go play these things out. And I believe it's a path of personal growth and development that, only the strong survive. And it's really, I think the fortunate people who take these highly adverse circumstances and turn them into their greatest strengths. And that is the calling or the invitation when we're engaged with any kind of, addiction or problem or mental illness. When we can disentangle from that, we become incredibly strong and wise people, I dare say. So thank you again for that, Andy. Um, Someone else writes, how should you, if you should at all, decide to stop feeling heartbroken and marinating in your feelings? Is there a point at which you're wallowing? Well, that's a curious thing. It is a choice point at some point, because when we continue to loop the past over and over again, I believe that kind of obsession is in service of not facing the future. So if you cheated on me, as long as I stay angry with you and engaged with you, and I keep ruminating about why you did what you did to me, I don't have to deal with my heartbreak, with my real despair, with my terror of being alone or being single or being sexual again with somebody, which would seem so weird. Um, just dating, all of that, like nobody wants to face any of that after 20, 30 years of marriage. And yet, staying in the past, staying in obsession, staying in rumination does nothing but rob us of years, precious moments and days and years of our lives where we can't get on with our lives. And there's nobody dictating that you ever have to be in relationship again, but you don't want to stay in the relationship of the past because that is just toxic. And as long as we stay angry with that person, as long as we stay in, obsession or perseveration about them, we're in relationship with them. So I think that is the answer to your question about wallowing. When you realize that, hey, I'm not moving my life forward here. I'm just on the spin cycle, the rinse, repeat cycle here, and I need to step out of that. And you then, right, sometimes it feels silly almost that I am still hurt and sad at times about 2 years later after an intense breakup that involved sex addiction and betrayal from my partner. Well, this is where we really, really have to exercise self-compassion. It's not silly to be heartbroken, to feel bereft, to feel like I have no idea who I am without this person. But what if that person died? What if that person was in a horrible car accident or in something atrocity like 9/11? People pick up the pieces and they move forward. And to berate yourself because, you shouldn't have let your partner drive that night, or you shouldn't have told your partner to go to work because he or she didn't feel good that day, and you said to them, you should go anyway. It's a zero-sum game. So you can go over and over and over again about what you did or what could have been different, or you can still be in the hurt and the loss and the pain 2 years later, but that's just natural. So practicing self-compassion is crucial here. Just notice that, oh, I still feel sad about that, or, oh, I wish I could celebrate that holiday with my partner, but it's sad and it's disappointing that I can, and it's okay that I can't. So these are the more subtle, the more challenging things that take place over time. So you have to keep working your process. There's a beautiful book I've mentioned several times called The Mindfulness Self-Compassion Workbook by Kristen Neff. And you can find that on Amazon, and we'll put it into the chat box for you. But I highly recommend that workbook because it really has you imagining self-compassion in ways you might not have imagined it before. And it's really lovely to work with. And then someone writes, have you found any information on Peyronie's disease related to sex addiction? I don't have any information related to that. I've had a few clients over the years that have suffered from Peyronie's that were sex addicts, but I don't think it's a one-to-one correlation. Someone writes, I've come into awareness that I am an intimacy anorexic. I'm working with a trained therapist and a group like me of sex and love addicts. Well, that sounds great. I'm happy to hear that you're doing that. You might want to take a look at Patrick Carnes' book called Sexual Anorexia if you haven't already, which really helps people start to think about what healthy sexuality is, and going forward from the anorexic state. Paul writes, heartbreak can be breakdown, break up, break apart, or to be broken open to discover the unknown skills and powers of coping that have been there and perhaps hidden because of childhood coping by closing down the ability to be sensitive. Well, that's a lot in one sentence, Paul, but I think that is beautiful. That we think about it as discovering the unknown skills of power that we didn't know we had because of childhood trauma and closing down early. And lots of pain for me has been recognition of a lack of willingness to engage with caring that was available to me, but which I wouldn't allow myself to engage in. So yes, the heartbreak can come from devastation, or deprivation. I'm sorry. Yes, it comes from devastation, but also our own deprivation can lead to continued heartbreak. That I'm depriving myself of moving forward, or I'm depriving myself of setting boundaries so I can let go. So I keep breaking my own heart over and over again because I keep expecting things to be different and they're not, because I'm afraid to let go, really afraid to let go. So Ron writes, my wife of 47 years tells me that she has no capacity to work through the workbook exercises and has expressed despair that we will never heal and repair. Well, I don't know if there's a question in that, but if people are not willing to do the work, whatever the work is, then there's no way to do the repair. So sitting on the sidelines and despairing is not going to change anything. It just digs people into deeper despair and depression. And we come to a point, or we have to come to a point at some point in our adulthood where we realize that nobody's going to come rescue us, that we have to come to our own rescue, that we have to throw ourselves a rope and grab it and get to work because no one else is going to do that for us. So if your wife is on the sidelines, that doesn't stop you from doing the workbooks, from reading, from going to therapy, from going to groups, and you can get better. And whether she chooses to or not is up to her, but there's only so much you can do. You can't really save her. So Myrna writes, is it necessary to go no contact after a breakup? My girlfriend and I ended the relationship last November. We wanted to remain friends, but it seems like I was the only one needing to hear from her. And I think it's making it harder for me to let go of her. Well, I would agree. I think, I'm always curious about people wanting to remain friends after a breakup. I understand if people have children, and they have to parent together, that they need to create some sort of stability with each other. And even if people want to, quote, become friends, I think you need a good period of time of no contact before that's even possible. I mean, if you break up with somebody or you divorce somebody with somebody, it's because you're not friends. You know, you can still love somebody and divorce them, but you probably don't like them if you're divorcing them. So where is the friendship? The friendship is typically the first thing that shatters. It's not the love. We love all sorts of people, but it doesn't mean that we like them. So I would highly recommend that you stop contacting your ex-girlfriend, you let her go, and you grieve your loss because you are still looking backward and holding on to the past and trying to fill a void with that, as opposed to cutting ties and letting yourself fall into the void and seeing where the healing is there for you. Somebody writes, I'm going through a divorce after many, many years of trying to work on my own porn addiction and find stability with my wife. We've already been separated for a year, but aside from some initial sadness and grief, the predominant feeling I have is overwhelming relief, and my recovery has been the best it's ever been. There's a lot in our relationship that I couldn't see from the inside that I'm seeing now, and am I missing an important grief step? How do I know I've worked through what I need to? Well, it sounds like you're doing a fantastic job. Just that statement that I have overwhelming relief and my recovery has been the best it's ever been. There's a lot in our relationship I couldn't see from the inside that I'm seeing now. And that's the old adage of you cannot see the forest for the trees. So congratulations for you getting out of it and for you being able to see now how you were using pornography to escape what you couldn't see or wouldn't see, and how you don't need to keep sort of torquing your own nervous system with excessive pornography, because you're actually able to feel and see what you couldn't see then. So my best recommendation to you would be for you to keep, writing and doing what you need to do to process the loss of the marriage, but to also start to do some work about what a healthy relationship looks like for you so you don't repeat any of these patterns. What are your green lights, your deal breakers? What would a healthy sex plan, dating plan look like for you so that you don't settle next time or step into a relationship you don't want to be in? Um, so to continue on our topic of heartbreak, um, the greatest calling in life is to love deeply, I believe, and to love without condition and abandon, at least initially. And I don't want to say that I think all love is unconditional. I don't. I think when you are in a relationship with somebody, whatever your contracts are, whether it's consensual non-monogamy or it's monogamy, you have conditions under which you've agreed to be in this partnership with and agreed to love. So even in that deep loving and that willingness to love deeply, um, we know that eventually we will either leave or be left because somebody's going to die first, or somebody's going to make a choice that the other person doesn't like, um, or even doesn't agree with. But this is the calling. This is the calling that great poet Rilke talked about when he said it's better than to have loved deeply than to and lost than to have not have loved at all. And it's been said that we are here on earth to risk our hearts, to risk loving, and that our heart was made to be broken. Um, so when you think about that, that our hearts were made to be broken. There is no one perfect relationship, no one perfect love. I mean, I've heard people who loved deeply in a new relationship, a very young relationship, 1 or 2 months old, and then the person died. And in some ways, or they lost a child, they lost a baby after, several months or a year. And they recognize that in that profound heartbreak, They loved in the most pristine and perfect way, even in the face of that unimaginable pain. So avoiding heartbreak means avoiding living, avoiding risking, avoiding connecting with people in a way that matters to us. So trying to outrun your own natural reaction to a crushing loss only ends up strengthening the crushing loss. And that ends up being a very painful loop to stay in. So I keep saying this in different ways, but you cannot escape your pain from heartbreak. You cannot escape your loss from loving or being a human being in this lifetime. You just can't. So you have to embrace it fully. I mean, just think about losing a pet and the heartbreak that comes from that. I lost a cat in August that I loved deeply and loved so much more than I even knew on some level. And I still feel a little bit of grief and loss about that today. I still miss her deeply, and it's still a fairly fresh wound. And um, so to act like it didn't matter, or she was just an animal, or I'm just going to get another animal, and act like it wasn't that big of a deal, doesn't allow me to feel the depth of my feeling, how much that loss permeates every part of who I am, because that allows us to fill in the colors of who we are, so that we are more permeable, we are more empathic, we are more available to our feeling states. And sometimes people will revert to mood altering substances or experiences to keep the agony at bay, but that's just a temporary fix. And ultimately, it comes back to us tenfold. So that is not a good strategy either. And look, if somebody is breaking up or getting divorced and they go drown their woes with alcohol, for a little while, then that's probably fine. But at some point, you got to get out of that mess and you've got to start moving forward and letting yourself deal with the reality of it. Somebody's asking, can forgiveness happen without reconciliation? Um, Again, that's sort of an ethical or moral question. Um, can you really have reconciliation without the truth? Would be a question that I would ask before that. Can you forgive somebody if you don't know what you're forgiving them for? Or if they haven't told you the complete truth? I don't know. Rob says, for myself, I disagree with your statement that if you're going through a divorce or breakup, that you are not ready, you're not really friends. Am I fooling myself if I hold the belief that we can let go of our romantic connection without giving up the other aspects of our platonic relationship? I don't think so. And I don't think I'm saying that, Rob, but I am saying that I think there needs to be a period of grief and loss. And that we're not grieving the loss together because there's an intimacy in that and a closeness in that that feels like an intimate love relationship. So it's somewhat tricky to me to go get our needs met from the person we always got our needs met from, who's no longer going to meet our needs, that we're using them as a scaffold, when I'm suggesting that you cut the scaffold, that you go grieve your loss and your pain, and you reach out to friends and family members, therapists, 12-step community, whomever, and you go heal your wounds with others, so that when you're going back to that person in a friendship, you're coming back without that neediness from them, because that's not going to feel good in a friendship. If that person feels like they still have to provide those needs for you, when that's not really, like, friends do that to a certain extent, but not the way lovers do it and not the way love relationships do it. So I hope that clarifies that. Um, Someone writes, do all or certain heartbreaks stick with us to an extent? Even if we decide to move on, will I always feel a little sad about this person, that this person cheated when I think of it? Does that mean I can't move on? No, not if it's a little sadness. I think, we can all look back on relationships that were heartbreaking and say, I wonder what it would have been like if that lasted, if it worked out, if I did have a child with that person. Like, what would my life be like today? Or I'm sad that I couldn't cross that bridge with that person because they were a really good person, but they had a lot of things standing in their way, like they were still married or they were living cross country. Sure, we're always going to feel a little wistful, perhaps, for the one that got away or the heartbreak of a, let's say, high school or college romance that didn't go well. So I don't think there's anything wrong with those vestigial feelings. It's when those feelings are so alive and intense that we are in obsession, rumination, perseveration in real time, and we can't let go of the person. I think those are very different experiences. So if you can't recognize heartbreak as the catalyst for healing unresolved issues, um, you will have difficulty getting through that. You won't see the eye of the storm where there's a clearing. As somebody wrote so beautifully, that in the heartbreak, in the busting up of the whole thing, in the shattering, is an ability to see what I could not see when I was in the relationship. So this is not just about the ending of this relationship. It is a catalyst for all of our unresolved issues, all of our childhood attachment issues, our abandonment issues, our issues around rejection. It's an opportunity to heal these things as an adult, which we could not heal as a child because it just wasn't possible in that configuration. So while you mourn the personal loss of love, and a universal pain that everybody knows. They don't know the particulars. Each person's situation is incredibly different and unique, but universally, we can all relate to this topic. We have to know that our lives are changing, and our lives are changing all the time anyway. We just don't see it from day to day, moment to moment. But when you are in a breakup, it feels like you are tumbling, and that time is speeding up, and you're trying to hold on and grasp on to what was because you're too terrified to let go into the tumble. It's sort of like, if you're spinning in a giant wave at the ocean, and you're trying to get to the top of the wave, which can actually hurt you at some point. If you just try to relax your body and spin with the tumble, it will bring you to shore. And growth is taking place there, and you might feel a little bit beat up as a result of it, but something new is coming out of the ashes of this grief. Something new, something alchemical, something emergent is taking place, and we can never see it while we're in it. We only see it in retrospect. We only see it when we get out of it. As someone wrote earlier, that when I got out of it, I could see what I couldn't see when I was in the relationship. And now I can address those patterns so I don't repeat them again. So there is something alchemical taking place that is natural. It's really, really natural. And there is a beauty to it when you can feel the beauty and the joy on the other side. But you will never feel that unless you dive into the pain, into the heart of the heartbreak, into the abject abyss of loneliness and terror and all the scary things that go with letting go. That's when you will find yourself, and that's when you will find your personal growth. You can think of this process as a holy fire, if you will, as a sacred act between you and your higher power or the universe. A time when people would evoke the saying of let go and let God. This challenge at these times, again, is to dive deeply into the pain because denial just accrues more suffering. And it also prolongs the agony, as I said. You're just wasting precious days and hours of your life, and you're also hamstringing the other person, whether directly or energetically, because you are keeping them from having to feel their pain also. So you're really in this kind of codependent betrayal bond where you're both hanging on for dear life, but you're not letting each other go and grow. And the irony is, if you really love that person, you would let them go so they could grow. And you would let yourself grow also if you loved yourself. So sitting in the stillness, sitting in that abyss is where the transformation begins. Our daily sexual health or healthy sex acts today are to take time to see the suffering around you, even if you're not in the midst of a breakup, but just really see the suffering around you, whether it's on the streets where you live or it's on many of the wars or the famines all over the planet. And don't look away. And I'm not advising that you doom scroll or that you live in this pain, but I am advising that you don't look away, that you dose in the suffering, and ask yourself, how does it feel in your heart? And how does it change you? And visualize white light, that you're sending white light through your higher power or the higher power of someone in need, or even through the crown chakra of your head if you don't believe in a higher power, but sending all of the light and energy of your body to that person, to those people, and let yourself, your heart break for that person's pain or those people's pain, so both of you suffer a little less. And be generous with your love, with your visualizations, with your extending your energy out into the world. And choose to see this heartbreak as bittersweet, whether it's the ending of a romance or a friendship. While it can be gut-wrenching, it can be the beginning of liberation and growth. So ask yourself, with whom do I need to end things with today? And show empathy to yourself through your actions and be brave, be courageous. The word courage comes from the word heart in French. So open your heart, use your heart to be helpful to others. So somebody writes, Francis Weller's book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, has helped them a lot. So thank you for that. Again, Francis Weller's book, The Edge of Sorrow, and perhaps we can put that in the chat box, please. Also, there's a title by Florence Williams, which is escaping me now. And hopefully, Bree, if you're listening, you put that in the chat box also. But she wrote a book about the breakup of her marriage of 30 years and the unbelievable pain she was experiencing and how she went on a sojourn to understand why it was so painful. So you can take a look at some of those books also. There's The Edge of Sorrow is in the chat box now, I believe. And then one final book by Florence Williams. So I want to remind you that this webinar will be up on our YouTube channel, Center for Healthy Sex, that you can find us at centerforhealthysex.com, where you can find out all of our offerings. Again, the Women's Love Addiction Workshop is online Saturday, April 13th from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. And I think if you're struggling with love addiction, you'll get a lot out of that program as well. So thank you for your open-heartedness today and for all your beautiful contributions to this conversation. There was a lot of wisdom that came through here today. To remind you that those resources are in the chat box right now if you're looking before I end this meeting. And I hope you have a beautiful April and that you think of this time, no matter what your spiritual beliefs are, as a time of renewal, because spring is springing. It's certainly incredibly green here in Los Angeles and the flowers are blooming. And it's always a beautiful time for me to remember that this is a time of renewal, a time of opening up to the world, a time of spring cleaning. Whether it's people or dusty books or things that gathered in the winter that you no longer need. So be generous in giving of your heart and giving away of your things that you no longer need and letting go of people that no longer serve you and, blessing them and wishing them well on their journey and stepping into your own new journey. So I look forward to seeing you then in May and hope you have a beautiful April. Thank you.